So hello, Float Magic fans. Thanks for joining us today. For today's podcast, I actually asked the creator of our podcast, Zack, to be on to ask some questions that we often get from our clients who are trying to figure out if the ailments that they're going through or the conditions that they're in still allow them to take part of our services. So I appreciate Zack being willing to ask these questions. So.
You bet. I butt in every now and then over the mic, so I might as well butt in person every now and then.
Now people can put a face at least with the, with the voice and the name. So yeah,
with my newly braced face. Well, cool. Okay, so you've kind of pre-prepared me here with a list of common questions that you kind of run across a lot. So we're gonna try and tackle those today. You just want to jump right into it?
Yeah, let's just go ahead. Well, and we don't ever hesitate to call and ask us questions if there are some things that our clients really want to clarify. We are more than happy to answer those questions. Sometimes I get referred those questions a lot because of my nursing background. So I've engaged with a lot of ailments and a lot of conditions. So
you're pretty used to it.
Yes. So I can speak to those. Of course, it's always a good idea to talk to your medical provider about a lot of these things. But there are still, we have such foreign services that even some medical providers don't quite know.
Right.
What can be used when and how. And so I would never go against medical advice. If you're given some that contradicts what I say stay with the medical provider or your own gut instinct. But yes, we try to provide that information just as readily as we possibly can.
Doesn't hurt to ask as many people as possible.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so let's start into the first one. So first one is age. Is there, how young can you go? How old can you be? Is there any, do you facilitate older folks that might have a hard time moving around? Or what's your policy and what's the kind of the questions that you run across?
Most? So what our policy is anyone younger than 15, we 15 and older, 16 and older, can float with us free and clear or use our services free and clear.
Okay.
We do ask that they parents sign off on their waivers up until they're 18.
Okay.
But even that doesn't mean that if you're 15 or younger, you can't use our services. It just elicits a conversation. So younger individuals, it really depends on the maturity of the service that they're using and the maturity of the individual.
Around
exactly. Our salt water can get everywhere, so we really don't want someone mistaking it as a swimming pool. But however, we have had as young as 11 float in our pools.
Wow.
By themselves. So and they have found great relief. There are some disorders that are sensory disorders, and they can benefit greatly from being detached from all that sensory.
Right.
So then we have a lot of student athletes that come in that use the Novathor, that use the cold plunge, that float, and they're using that for their sports recovery.
Right.
And
especially if they're going to be professionals, that's kind of a norm in the industries that they're going into. So
absolutely. And you see a lot of colleges putting the exact services that we have in place.
Right.
So that's exciting to me to see colleges really tap into these recovery tools. But that being said, if there's students, especially like concussions with our Novathor, we can really help a student recover from concussions, adults alike, anybody who's dealing with a concussion. And so we actually have specific discounts for students. I also wanted to mention the Salt Cave. Anybody younger than 5 can come into the Salt Cave absolutely free with a parent.
Anyone can breathe.
Yes, anybody can breathe. And those young children actually enjoy playing in the salt. So if they have some type of condition like RSV, RSV season is pretty strong between October and now.
Right.
And so we've had young children come in, they bring their sand trucks. They bring their tools to come in and just play in that salt cave so they can breathe in that salt.
I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, there's actually salt caves in some areas that have a children specific space so they can play in that because it's so good for them. So
now what about the other end of the spectrum for older folks? Is there anything you want to touch on with that?
Absolutely. So our age for clients range from 18 months up to 92 years old. So we have wide availability for all ages. Okay. All I want to precaution against with older individuals is to make sure their strength is up. And if they don't have the strength to pull themselves up out of a tub, we do have transfer benches and things of that nature so they can get in and out, but it's the strength to pull them up out of the water.
Right. And it's kind of slippery too.
It is. It's slippery. You tend to be a little heavier because you just were weightless. So everything's relative, right? Yeah. Once you get out of that water and you're no longer weightless, you feel extremely heavy. Plus, there's a little bit of lethargy that comes from floating. You're going to feel very relaxed, very tired. And so those older generations, individuals and clients of ours, if they can't get out of that space by themselves, we ask that they bring somebody to facilitate that with them. I have training in that area, but I'm seldom here. My staff is not trained to transfer people. Okay. And so if transferring has to occur, it's a good idea to bring somebody with you. And then
either way, there should be some consideration.
Absolutely. And then on both sides of the spectrum, and anybody really, they have to have control of their bowels, control of their of their motions. Not emotions. A lot of times people lose control of their emotions when they come in here, and that's okay. But that's yes, allowed. It is. It's
and
a safe.
Encouraged.
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, but those things need to go into consideration with age.
Excellent.
Yep.
So that the talk of children also brings up the idea of pregnancy.
Yes.
People are pregnant.
Yes.
And that is a consideration that a lot of people have to take into thought. What are some of the things that pregnant people will kind of encounter when they come here, or should they should consider?
Yes. So with our pregnancy individuals, I mean, this is floating. First and foremost is one of the most relaxing things you can do while you're pregnant. It can be a very magical experience.
A lot of pressure off.
Yes. It's hard to sleep. You've got this other human in your body. Sometimes you can hear the other human's heartbeat. You can hear your baby's heartbeat when you float. And so it's a great release for our expectant mothers, especially later in their pregnancy. So what we encourage our pregnant clients to consider is how far along they are. It is actually safe to float right in the beginning.
Really?
It is. We've had a lot of float center owners that float the entire time they're pregnant.
I was about to ask that if you've had somebody that throughout the entire journey has done that.
Yes,
and do they say any good things about that?
Absolutely. There's just a lot of peace that comes and rest to their body as they're building another human inside of them.
I'm sure mentally and physically.
Absolutely. It's a great process for their relaxation and to lower those levels of cortisol and to help them stay balanced and gravity free at the times when the baby starts to grow. However, for us, we encourage pregnant clients not to float until after their 12 weeks. Okay. And that's because there is a pH balance shift that can happen when you're in our water because of all the Epsom salt that's present.
There's just a little bit in there.
Just a little bit. And so we don't want to, correlation doesn't always mean causation. However, we don't want to put any of our clients in the window of where those 12 weeks are precious. There's a lot of things you need to avoid in those 12 weeks. And so we just, as a common precaution measure, ask that people don't float until they're 12 weeks along.
Right.
But once they're 12 weeks and they can come in here
Mm-hmm.
and their baby's growing at that point, they probably need our services more at that
When
point.
you really start feeling it and it's really
Yeah.
starting to take its toll.
Absolutely. And then on the other side of pregnancy, we ask that you don't float after 36 weeks, not because it's unsafe for you and the baby, but because that relaxation process can actually help you efface
And actually
and send you into labor. Yeah. And so we don't want there to be any type of situation where our water is introduced to the fetus at all. So if your water tends to break, first of all, it's contaminating our water, which isn't a good thing. That's a costly thing. And for us and the client, exactly. And so, yeah. And then also, just that exposure to the fetus once that barrier of water has been broken. So that's the window, 12 to 36 weeks. We encourage those pregnant clients to come in and find some relief with us.
Perfect.
Now, there's services they can't use while pregnant. The Novathor is not recommended to be used during pregnancy. It does penetrate deep enough to get to the fetus. And because of its cellular regeneration properties and the mitochondrial action, you don't want to interrupt any of that natural growth process in the fetus. And so pregnant mothers are expected to stay away from the Novathor until after your baby is born. Then it'll probably be pretty beneficial. Saunas are also not recommended because of their high heat. Oftentimes people think our pools, they equate it to a hot tub. It's very different. It's not. It's body temperature, but our saunas can get extreme high temperatures, and it's not recommended that.
I'd imagine cold plunge would also be
cold plunge
same.
And I haven't done a ton of study about cold plunge in pregnancy, but I think that shock to your system and just that pulse of cortisol, I would.
Burst of survival instincts probably isn't ideal.
It's probably not ideal, but that I still have to study and learn about. And
that'd be interesting.
It would be.
If that could also maybe induce labor somehow.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
It does some. I mean, they do show with cold plunge that it kind of shunts blood supply to certain things. And that's where they're studying cancer and cold plunge, is that it actually shunts the blood supply to the tumors. And so it can help with cancer in some forms.
But when you want to grow something, maybe it's not good.
Exactly. So that would lead me to think, maybe hold off. Yeah. And then our salt cave is perfectly fine to use during pregnancy at any phase. And so
salt cave takes all.
It does. The salt cave is just such a lovely environment. So you can go in there at most any time. So
is there anything else you want to cover for pregnancy?
No, our massage chairs are somewhat questionable too. And that is because of the opportunity for blood clots and the position that you're laying in. It's supposed to be zero gravity and not have any pressure on your body, but there's still a concern there. So definitely use that with caution.
Maybe more gentle settings.
Yes, definitely go on the gentle side. Maybe don't massage your legs if you're prone to blood clots. Right. So, and that's for anybody that's prone to blood clots, because those massagers in our chair work and they can break it up. So.
Yeah, they definitely work.
Yeah.
The settings you can set those things to, you can get beat up if you want to.
Yes, we've had people go, yow, in there because their feet are getting squeezed so tight. So,
so that kind of leads right into the next thing. Breastfeeding. There's a lot of consideration that has to go into breastfeeding. As I learned from my friends that are recently pregnant, I had no idea. What's the immediate concern that a lot of them would have to make sure they know?
So a lot of times, like expressing milk and floating is a concern. So you just want to make sure that that doesn't get into our waters. That's a concern on our side of things. It's not necessarily something that is bad for the breastfeeding mother. But other than that, there is not much. There's There's some thought about what high heat does to the glands when you're breastfeeding also. So that is something, of course, it can also help. Like some mothers get mastitis. And so, those hot and cold compressions can be really beneficial for that. And it can help detox their body.
Bring relief.
But the question does still remain with those high heat and that detoxing. Does it get into mother's milk? So that's a question we get often.
What about Novathor?
Novathor is perfectly fine to use after you while you're breastfeeding.
I imagine the salt cave is perfectly fine too.
It is. As far as what I've studied and looked into, the salt cave is the only time the salt cave can be an inhibiting factor is if there's a lot of mucus that's being produced, and you can't clear it very easily because you're going to get a lot of that break up and move through your body. So, but yeah, so saunas, again, precaution a little bit with breastfeeding and just floating as far as how your milk is coming in. So.
Excuse me?
Mm-hmm.
So next on the list, surgery. What do folks have to take into consideration for certain surgeries versus others? Is there anything that's really common that you've come across?
Yeah, so a lot of people ask us about pre and post surgery. So pre-surgery, our services are great because what you're doing is you're putting, a lot of our services allow for that anti-inflammatory effect in your body, which is just going to allow for a better end result and a better outcome when you go through surgery. So a lot of people come in and float leading up to surgery or do the IR sauna, or the Novathor is very popular. Pre-surgery. Post-surgery, what you have to take into consideration is the incisions. So if you have...
for floating especially. I had a single small cut on my thumb that I didn't know was there, and then I very much knew was there.
Yes,
so
yes.
I imagine that would not be fun if you were freshly opened.
Yes.
That sounds so bad.
If you have any incisions in your body at all and they're still healing, that's twofold. Yes, it will be very painful in the salt water.
And not good for the...
And not good for and also it's not, you don't want to introduce anything foreign into those incisions. So a lot of doctors will tell you 6 weeks after surgery before you get in the, soak it, get in a pool. And the same applies for us
maybe
too.
Even a little bit longer past that, just to be safe.
Well, not necessarily. I mean, once, because a lot of the salt water will help it heal also. But a lot of doctors also give that recommendation for our Novathor bed, and because they're most concerned about introducing infection when you've had any type of wound. However, our Novathor bed is extremely helpful in wound healing. And so that conversation can be had with a doctor. PBMT is known to help with collagen production and skin and wound healing. It helps heal it a lot faster than if you just went without. So my recommendation is get in here as soon as you can after surgery. We thoroughly clean our equipment. And so there shouldn't be any concern at all about infection introduction. I mean, I maybe wouldn't come in the day after, but I would give it 10 to 14 days and then coming in to use the Novathor bed or even our handheld Thor laser device would be perfectly okay. Same with the salt cave.
I know you have a handheld one.
I do. Yes.
I have no idea. How long have I been doing this podcast? I didn't know there was a handheld one.
That's okay. It's hard to keep up.
So, speaking medical wise, we'll kind of go a little bit into this direction. Epilepsy.
Yes. So epilepsy, that is a big concern for us when an individual is floating, mainly because seizures, if they're very well controlled and they're able to manage when they come on, floating can be very helpful for individuals with epilepsy. However, if anyone were to go into an event where they are having convulsions and seizures, being in water is the last place somebody wants to be.
And very, very salty water.
Yes, and water that will not, it'll be painful if they
Yeah.
get into any
Eyes
part of
or-
their
yeah.
mucous membranes.
Yeah.
And so we don't want to cut people out completely that have epilepsy and floating. So we ask that they have a sitter in there with them the whole
Right.
time they float.
So probably the open float room.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. The open float room is designed for that because people can sit right on the side of and be right there close for there is a light in there that oftentimes sitters will trigger, which is, it's hard to sit completely still. But there is a portion you can kind of sit back and not have that. So
Right.
our light bed is also it can potentially trigger us some seizure activity. So if you wear the eyepieces that block
Especially
out the
before you turn it
light,
on. 'Cause it is pretty bright in there if you don't have those on.
yes.
So.
Yeah. And so you can try it with the goggles and see, but if you are concerned or if you feel like that service is going to be super beneficial for a member of your family that has that condition, we always recommend having a sitter present just to make sure and see how they respond to the therapy.
As far as I'm aware, there's no flashing lights really in the facility anywhere.
No.
Just bright lights sometimes.
Yeah, bright lights. And I mean, and if you look through the Novathor in cameras, it kind of looks like there's a strobe effect, but it's not really.
That's just the frequency. Of
yep,
the light,
exactly. Yeah. It's a light frequency and the light waves moving. So, but we do just take those precautions.
Perfect. Now a big one, cancer.
Yes, we get asked often about cancer, especially because most people dealing with cancer are also dealing with a lot of emotional and mental stress that we can absolutely help them through with our services. So the precautions that we tell people who are dealing with cancer, one, if you're on chemotherapy, we ask that you refrain from floating.
Right.
Because that chemo drug can actually move from your body into the water, and
if you're saturated enough with it, then
absolutely, yep. Yeah. And so, so we encourage people to not float until they've been off chemo for at least a period of time, 4 to 6 weeks. So that's out of their system. Another contraindication for cancer and active tumors is our Novathor. The PBMT is pretty fascinating. There's still a lot of studies out there that are trying to gauge exactly what it works on and how. But it's been shown to decrease some cancer cells and it's been shown to increase others. So if you think about the mechanism of the light therapy, what it does is activating photon light in our mitochondria, and that increases cellular regeneration.
Right.
So we don't want the wrong cells to be activated.
No matter what, it's going to be beneficial for you.
Yes.
It might affect some people differently, but
yes. And we have had people who have very localized cancer tumors. They'll cover themselves up.
Okay.
They'll put, even if it's gone and they're in remission, they'll still cover that spot up just so they don't take any risks of activating that cellular response.
Up to the person.
Absolutely.
Whatever they're comfortable with.
Yes. And then when it comes, same with chemo in our plunge pool, you're again in water. You're not in that water nearly as long as you're in our float pools. And so, and because of what's coming out with plunge therapy and cancer, the plunge is really encouraged to be used because of those immunoactivating properties that happen. And the resilience of your body is all being activated.
Right.
And so it's really encouraged with clients who have cancer. However, if you're actively in chemotherapy, maybe refrain from using that cold plunge.
Right. Which I imagine there's a lot of things like that they have to consider. So
yeah,
understandable.
Yeah, but then again, our other services, the massage chairs, the salt cave, our saunas are great for that detoxing of individuals who have chemicals in their bodies. So those are still okay as long as your medical provider feels that your body's not going to be overstressed, because the cold plunge and the sauna cause your body stress. Right. It's a temporary stress, which actually benefits us. However, it's a stress, and if your immune system's already mobility compromised, that might be something that you want to hold off on.
And that also brings up the question of if they have the strength to
get in and out.
Right.
Yes.
Which kind of segues right into our next thing, which we've covered a little bit with when it comes to age, mobility.
Yes.
For folks that have any disability that kind of impairs their movement or might make it difficult, what do they have to think about?
Yeah, so we do have tools to help individuals in our services. So most of our services have grab bars. And we have a transfer bench present. Pretty much all of our rooms are wheelchair accessible. And so all of our services, given the salt cave, we had to put a lip in the salt cave. So it's a little difficult, and there's salt on the floor. So it's a little difficult for individuals with wheelchairs to go into that space. However, if they need help with mobility, we do have transfer benches and if they bring somebody to help with that mobility, that's your best answer overall, is if you're concerned about your mobility, bring somebody with you to help you through that process.
Just to make it easier.
Absolutely. Because there's times that my staff, I have men and women, and my women are really petite, except for me, I'm the exception.
Don't have any burly Scandinavian women.
Yeah. I can lift quite a bit, if I'm honest. And when I'm here, I probably do more than I should. But yeah, there's times when we have our male staff present that they can help a little bit more with individuals. And so, but yeah, we're constantly troubleshooting those opportunities to help people with mobility, because that we want everyone to have access to our services. So.
Perfect. So it's kind of one of those call ahead and have the conversation with you first.
Absolutely.
And we can see, how you can kind of accommodate that.
Yes. Yeah. Or when in doubt, just bring somebody with you.
There you go.
Yeah.
When it comes to skin specifically, can you talk a little bit about that and what people need to consider or maybe even ask about?
Yeah, absolutely. So when it comes to skin disorders like eczema or psoriasis, naturally our float pools are a concern for them, depending on how severe their condition is, because of that intense salt water.
Right.
So Epsom salts are what's used in there, which react very rarely with sensitivity wise. However, when you have open sores or scabbed over wounds because of your eczema or psoriasis, it can be painful. The other side of that is it can be helpful. It can actually help repair those conditions. And so there's kind of a sweet spot for people. You kind of really need to know your condition, know when you're exposing yourself. When it's wet salt, it has a totally different outcome than our dry salt. So dry salt cave for those conditions are really, really good and encouraged. And that might heal you up to a point where then you can go into our float pools and use them then. When it comes to sensitivity, and back to our Novathor is really great for those conditions as well. They rarely, I'm trying to think if anyone's even had a rash when they haven't had any reports of that being the case with the Novathor, because it's activating the cells. So sometimes it could cause a little bit of a flare up and then before it gets better.
Right.
But I can't recall.
In general, most skin loves red light.
Yes. It's a very healing light for that skin. So it's a good idea to use it. When it comes to sensitivity, we have had individuals who've called us back about breaking out in a rash. Maybe it's only happened once or twice, and come to find out it's our shampoo product, not the conditions of our float pools. And so we have there's no scents or anything in our shower gel, and that's on purpose, so that if you have skin sensitivity, that you only use that shower gel. There's really very little in the other products of our shampoo and conditioner. However, there are essential oils in there, and some people have some extreme reactions.
Either.
No, there's no coloring. Maybe a little bit from the essential oils, but we do have vetiver, and that was shown to be a really poor reaction for one of our clients because there is vetiver in the shampoo. But when that's the case, you can just use our shower gel for all of your needs. And same with the saunas, and we have those shampoos and conditioners throughout the center. So
Perfect.
And we also provide A&D ointment for sensitive skin. I mean, we can have sensitive skin all over our body, blisters, cuts. I know certain areas of ours can be a little sensitive at times, depending on cycle of the month. And so we provide that A&D ointment for that.
Is there? I don't think I've ever heard of anyone having trouble with Epsom salt before. Is it a good rule of thumb if maybe see how you feel in an Epsom salt bath or with a bath bomb?
Yeah. Well, it's hard. It is hard to, I mean, if people have a reaction to Epsom salt, they generally know.
Right.
And we are so much more concentrated than you could ever get in a bath.
Yeah.
That they might know once but they're so rare. Epsom salts, magnesium sulfate rarely causes a reaction with people. So it's a pretty safe bet that it's something
very
else.
small window, but it's still something to think about.
Something to think about. Yeah.
Next, weight.
Yes. So we get a lot of questions about weight because we do have a weight limit. And that's a hard conversation to have with clients, because a lot of our therapies can help clients lose weight.
Right.
And so we don't want to turn anybody away if they're above a certain weight limit. Floating, 0 weight limit. You can float no matter how heavy you are. And believe it or not, you will float.
Yep.
The heavier you are, the more you'll float, actually. It's kind of a fascinating concept. The only areas we really have restrictions with our weight is in our Novathor bed. There's a 280-pound weight limit. Okay. And it's the same weight limit with our massage chairs.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And so those are our only weight limits. Our saunas, our salt cave. We actually have a larger recliner chair for our salt cave, so we can accommodate that. We do our best to accommodate all of that because it's something people are trying to improve their body with, or they're just naturally made at a denser weight. Right. There's people who have really dense body mass and
people that are just built different.
Yeah, and have a lot of muscle structure, right? And so there's a lot of weight that comes behind muscle, way more than our fat cells. So
now, kind of, it's not on the list, but kind of tie into that. What about when it comes to height versus tall versus short?
Yes.
Have you ever had anybody that's like exceptionally tall?
Yeah. So our Novathor is not the XL version. There is an extra long version, but
imagine for athletes.
Right. Yes. So, but we've had people as tall as 6'8" go into ours, and yes, they're tip to tip, but they fit and they get those lights in there. So, if you're over 7 feet tall, you might not fit in our Novathor. But as far as floating, our tanks are 8 feet long.
Wow.
And so people who are taller, when our taller clients find that they struggle is when they're floating with somebody else. Right. Because it takes up just a little bit. So they're unable to move quite as much. Right. The water's so dense, it keeps people kind of in your spot.
For being short comes in handy because I kind of just journey around the entire time.
Yeah. And then our cold plunge as well, like taller people find it's a little... It can be a little shorter for them. It is the biggest plunge we could buy at the time. There are some bigger ones, and we're actually looking at pulling some of those in because plunge has been so very popular. And so those, taller people might have their knees sticking out but it's okay because that water being submerged is still...
Really, as long as you get core.
Yep, core and up to your neck. Yep, and you can even dunk under. We're used to water going out. It just is what happens.
It just comes with the territory.
So don't, yep.
Okay,
don't worry about that.
You touched on it a little bit ago when we were kind of mentioning pregnancy and breastfeeding. Just general monthly cycles, menstrual cycles.
Yeah, so
you have to consider that.
Yes, a lot of women get concerned. They feel like maybe they can't float if they're on their cycle. And it's actually really beneficial to float, but we do ask that flow can be managed with either a cup or a tampon. Right. And then they're able to come in and get the relief that those come from. You also probably want to be cautious with the saunas during that time of month because you're already, your body's already letting go of a lot of iron and blood. Right. It can increase the flow sometimes with that. Some people find that beneficial. Other people, not such a good idea. So
Pads are not recommended.
yeah,
In the flow.
right, for sure. So no swimsuits and pads, please. So anyway, so those are all that you'll need to consider. The Novathor is perfectly safe. Massage chairs, salt cave. So
hair dyes.
yes. Hair dyes, and I'm just going to wrap in tanning with that too, because we use hydrogen peroxide to clean our whole center. It's some mix of hydrogen peroxide. We also use what's called force of nature, which mixes hydrogen peroxide with salt. So you actually get this kind of chlorine type effect without the chlorine. But that hydrogen peroxide, when it comes to any type of dye or color, it dissolves that molecule so you can
Not
separate. Yeah. And so if you're coming in with dyed hair, especially like the reds and the pinks and the purples, even the blues, it can get pulled out of your hair very quickly with the hydrogen peroxide.
I imagine freshly dyed too.
Right. So if you have freshly dyed hair, we ask you to wait 2 weeks before you come in here, even if it's highlighted or just brown dyed. 2 weeks is our measurement for that. If it's pink, purple, blue, which I love those color, I love that people are doing that. Greens, it's cool. However, that color, and especially if it's semi-permanent, it will come out in our water and it'll ruin the hair job, the hair dye job, and it will ruin our tanks. So same with tanning, any type of tanning that you apply, like if you're applying a spray tan or like a tanless lotion that kind of puts that dye on your skin, those come off so quickly in our salt water, and they can ruin our water. And that's a very costly thing for us and the client. Unfortunately, we do have on our waivers that there's a fee for any ruining of our water, because it takes 1,200 pounds of Epsom salt to refill that tank. So
just a little bit, but if you're naturally a bronze god or goddess, you're probably okay.
Yep, you're perfectly okay. Yep, it only has to do with those artificial things that we're adding to our bodies. So
perfect.
Yeah.
All right, I think we're about ready to wrap it up. So let's take it home with state of mind.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Yeah. So my team and I work really, really hard to create a safe space here. I talk about it often on our podcast. We talk about it all the time in our team meetings. It's when you're in a state of mind where you just need to grasp onto some form of hope, some form of reflection, we really want to be the go-to for people. And I think oftentimes people worry about the float tank. They're like, I don't know if I can sit with myself. I don't know what's going to come up.
Which probably means you definitely should sit with yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah. And people worry. They're like, what if I have a panic attack? What if something happens in there? And we've had those situations happen.
Right.
But my team is equipped and trained to handle those situations and to create and hold space for people who are going through that process. People are really concerned about their state of mind. Again, I would highly recommend they bring somebody in with them.
Yeah.
Couple floats are perfectly, we can accommodate that so easily. Right. We accommodate that often. People love to float together. It's quite an experience to listen, to the breath and heartbeat of somebody that you love. But it's a good idea to bring somebody if you're concerned about your state of mind. If you're concerned about the dark, maybe you're trying to fight a fear of water or the dark. It's if it's an extreme fear or phobia. Yes, exactly. It's a good idea to have somebody with you, but it's really a great environment to address those types of concerns. Same with our other services. We have people that come in that just need to zen out. They throw on the music in our saunas and they just sit and sweat it out, and music is booming. They boom it out and they sweat it out, and it's great. Salt caves the same. Such a wonderful. There's a lot of negative ions that are coming off that salt. Right. We're so inundated with positive ions.
Right.
Our phones, our computers, everything has this.
Everything.
Everything has this high electrical component to it, and it's super beneficial to get that balance in the salt cave.
Right.
And so even in this space here, this is our chill space. And as soon as our Zen's garden is done, it's really going to be beneficial to balance your state of mind and take advantage of what we have here. Even the Novathor, when I Novathor, sometimes I go into a whole different dimension. And it's lovely. I'll put on frequencies or some type of music, and it can take me places and give me a lot of clarity. So yeah, don't let your state of mind prevent you from coming in. In fact, really, if you're in a place where you need something, I hope we are top of mind for people.
Right. And I can attest that, it might be uncomfortable at first, and that's just because it's a new thing. That's just any new thing. Once you actually sit in with it, you can feel things that you haven't felt before, and that's an exciting and refreshing experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I'm so glad that you've taken time to do our services. Yeah. Thank you, Zach. So you can speak to it.
Well, it's if I'm gonna be making stuff for you, then I definitely want to try what you're talking about, and I could say from my own experience that I've enjoyed all of it. So
good. Well, and I hope it's helping with that creative factor you have to be in all the time. So
yeah. It doesn't stop me from saying yes to too many projects, but I don't know if you have a therapy that can help with that.
I don't know. Yeah, that's maybe in the people pleaser realms.
Yeah. Does the salt cave help with that?
Right.
Well, excellent. I think we've hit all the common questions here.
Okay. Well, thanks for being on. And
I
appreciate it. Yeah. So, wanted to remind all of you, if you have any concerns or questions about some of these ailments or ailments that we didn't cover today, please be sure to call in and have a chat with us.
Yeah.
And I would encourage you to push past any barriers that you've put up for yourself to come and try our services. It's a pretty magical opportunity that we have in this center. So come on in and try us out and just see how we can evolve your life and optimize your wellness. So thanks for joining us today. And just want to remind you, it's perfectly okay to stay salty.